Welcome to VCF Musketeers. This is going to be episode number 2, the podcast for all businesses utilizing or planning to utilize VMware Cloud Foundation. In today's episode, we are going to have Chris Wolf with me as a guest. Welcome, Chris. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself to the audience and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I lead the private AI business for the Cloud Foundation division at Broadcom.
Great to have you. So if you were to run into anyone, what would be, let's say, your elevator pitch in 60 seconds, why every enterprise should go with VMware Cloud Foundation for their private cloud?
Yeah, it's. I think there's a few things, and it's a few important things. First, if you look at a lot of the AI systems that are out there today, some of these integrated systems, they were initially designed for the data scientists. They're designed for research purposes. They were never designed for running production inference workloads. So when you start thinking about availability, security, lifecycle, all of the enterprise problems you have, that's going to be huge. You're also seeing that the traction around building AI models and just pure training is becoming less and less, and the focus is really applying AI models to business outcomes, which is AI inference. This is something we accelerate at. The last thing I would say around the VCF solution is what we're after here is providing choice of accelerators, choice of AI models and services, doing so with all of our northbound interfaces are open source, whether that's a Kubernetes API, whether that's a Hugging Face or NVIDIA native CLIs and so forth. So, the net elevator pitch is this. We can give you a production grade ops platform for any of your AI inference workloads. We can support any model that you'd like to run, any accelerator that you'd like to run, all with a common runtime. And we can do all of this at about 1/2 the total cost of ownership that you would see with another on-prem solution, with a neo cloud or a hyperscaler. So tons of value in terms of what we're providing. And this is driving a lot of the traction.
Yeah, you covered quite a few interesting bits and pieces here because VCF clearly is not only available when you want to run it on-prem. Clearly, that is one of the focus areas, but no one stops you from using it with any of the hyperscalers. There is still tons of cloud service providers out there, which is also an opportunity, I think, for those people who say, yeah, we want to run AI, but we don't really know how. So you can always also work with a partner out of the VMware ecosystem and actually bridge that gap, whether it is really the data scientist's part or how to get the infrastructure up and running and how to work with that. And I think that's where the perfect match comes into play between Broadcom partners and, in the end customer who is going to utilize that from a platform perspective. So I think that is what many people overlook at the moment from that. Also, what I heard is we are potentially not yet, but we are in the future also not necessarily going to be completely bound to the NVIDIA solutions. Is that true? Can you share something on that part maybe?
Yeah, there's a lot happening. And I love what you mentioned on partners. We see our partners as really our entire delivery arm, go to market, making sure that our customers, joint customers, can realize the full value of the platform. So that's important. We've designed the platform to be modular and interoperable by nature. So partners can and customers can pick and choose which of our services they want to consume and what they want to use third party. It's all good to us. No problem. And then on the accelerator side and hardware side, we announced support for, we already have support for NVIDIA's line of GPUs. We've had that for years. It's been a great partnership with them. Just recently, we announced support for both the Intel like Gaudi 3 GPUs as well as the AMD MI300 series GPUs. So we have some certification that we've done on the 300 and 325s. We're adding even virtualization enablement now for the MI350s. We'll have that in the coming year. And then, one other point that I think is also important here is in our 9.1 release, we're also adding full CPU support to our model runtime. So now with our model runtime, you have choice of AMD, Intel, NVIDIA, and CPUs. And think about the CPUs. You might say, well, wait, how would I use the CPU? You're not going to use a CPU for every generative AI use case, of course. However, if you're just trying to test the value of the platform, right, and just stand it up and learn more and start to run some of these services and experiment, there's no better way to do it than just leveraging your excess CPU capacity that you already have.
And I think that's also where VMware overall as a solution comes in quite handy, because if anyone in the industry is really looking into making workloads more flexible, getting features like DRS, which we had for years. I remember just a few years ago, we were at an Amazon conference and they were celebrating that finally you can move an EC2 instance from one host to another. And we were looking at each other and it's like, really, it's like that's what VMware has been doing for 20 years. It's like you could have just picked a different platform for that. But again, that is, as not all the workload is going to be in all your machines, whether it's virtual machines or Kubernetes, is going to utilize the full infrastructure the full time. You are far more flexible with a platform on VCF than if you were to use bare metal systems from that perspective, because that is what many people say is like, yeah, but then I have virtualization. I think VMware has proven multiple times that it's that thin and does not actually have that much impact on the infrastructure. But at the same point in time, companies, at least at the moment, run more than just private AI. They need everything. They need the virtual machines, they need Kubernetes workloads, and then they can now combine it with private AI without having to have multiple different silos, because I think that's what we try to get away from in the data center in the first place.
Yeah, and a couple of points on that that I think are very relevant here is for the AI use cases, the classic AI use cases now and generative AI, we typically see at most a 2% performance trade-off. And that's only if you're using the NVIDIA vGPU technology, because the vGPU software has some additional GPU memory overhead. And that would be using NVIDIA's vGPU with anybody else. If you want to use pass-through, then you're going to just get native GPU performance. And also to your point on DRS, I think this is really, really important because the AI infrastructure discussion, I think, overly emphasizes the GPU. And yeah, we need GPUs, but the amount of network IO I need is fundamentally different between a 13 billion parameter model and say a 400 billion parameter model, right? So this is where you start to get into how do you load balance network, data IO, your memory, your CPU and GPU at scale. And that's very hard computer science. And you nailed it that, this is technology we've been building for 20 years. This work has literally just started in the Kubernetes community with dynamic resource allocation being introduced in September. So you have something that's new in September versus something that we've been maturing for 20 years. There's a huge difference. And by the way, our plan with DRA is actually to integrate with it. So you can actually enhance the power of something that you might have thought of running on bare metal, but get way better results on VCF. And one other thing, because this is kind of top in mind, because I got home from Korea last night. And while in Korea, I met with one of the largest manufacturing companies there, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the world. They're in the process of moving almost half of their high performance computing estate over to VCF. So they've already done the performance testing and validation. They see it's pretty much on par with bare metal today, and you get all of those operational benefits. They struggle with the infrastructure in their clusters being able to turn over to new types of workloads and new test cases. And with VCF, it's just all done via software. So they're getting better business velocity moving to this platform, and we're continuing to see more of that.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect scenario. And it's not only about moving it while it's working. We also always need to think about what do we do if our physical host fails, if systems fail. All of these are areas where VMware, I think no one in the industry questions that VMware has all the technology for that, for failover, for automatic procedures. And then we have with VCF now making it a lot easier for people with VCF automation to actually build all the self-service for it so that your different teams can utilize it. We have all the advantages with VCF operations, which are also very important, I think, for businesses, not only to look at the performance, but also at the cost of each individual piece. Because, many people also move off the cloud because of the completely unpredictable costs they experience over there and all the surprises, because people only looked at what does my compute instance cost, but not what about storage, network, and all these additional pieces. And when we look at a lot of VMware customers in the past, many stepped away from having the individual components because everybody says like, yeah, we have already a monitoring solution. Why do we need operations? Why do we need this and that? And I think that's exactly what we now see with VCF is because we have it all integrated, it's all within one solution. This is going to make the adoption a lot easier. And also people can utilize all the features out of it. And I think that's what in the end makes it so much better. It's like it's from a simplicity perspective, like in the old Office days with Microsoft. It's like it was not long where people actually moved from just having Word or Excel and actually utilizing the full suite. And we have kind of the same scenario here. And when you really compare the costs and everything else, also when you look at the costs of infrastructure and everything else, the VCF part actually becomes the smaller part in the equation anyway. So I think that's a huge benefit to get all of these features and functionalities into the platform.
Yeah, I agree. The cost dashboards are there, and we see this all the time for cost. Like our value prop is key in terms of you get flexibility and choice at the bottom and top of the stack. We typically benchmark that we're at least half the cost of the other solutions out there, and it's just math. You can prove it, and then you're right that the per token cost with AI gets a lot of people in trouble, where your monthly spend can be very unpredictable. And the way around that is you have two options really. One is you can run open source models on prem or in a private data center that you control or lease. That's one approach. That gives you just a flat cost per infrastructure every month. That's very manageable and predictable. We're also seeing the commercial AI model providers, by and large, when you're running in a private cloud environment, you're not being charged per token. They're charging you per node or per GPU. It turns out to be their billing model. So again, you still wind up with this very predictable cost for your enterprise. And in general, it's typically, like I mentioned, half or sometimes could even be a fifth of the cost, depending on the solution that you're comparing to.
And I think that's very important because people now see also that everybody starts charging for AI. I said that in a different episode. It's like even our CRM vendor. Initially, it was like, oh, you get all these great AI features, and a couple of months it's just like, yeah, and now we are going to charge you per ticket or per token for it, because most likely they figured that there is a cost of running all the backend infrastructure behind it once customers turn it on, and this is something what enterprises figure out for themselves. And on top of all of that, it is still a long security game with all of that. I recently met with two industry leaders here in Germany who build, I think it's logistics or automation systems. And their whole point around AI was not that they were scared about their competitor, which has potentially the other 50% of the market to them. They basically said, look, the biggest risk for us is if we throw our data against a public system, the other one does that. Their biggest risk factor was not that the competitor would get it. Their biggest fear was is like, if someone who is new to this industry, for whatever data mistake out there, would actually get access to both of the data platforms and both of the data models, they could immediately become a major competitor for both of them. And they said, it's like, we know what we are competing with now. But if everybody, for whatever reason, and I know we all know that the models should actually be protected from that and all of that, but having the data and everything completely under control in your own data center is a huge differentiator for many businesses. And that has not everything all to do with sovereign cloud, but people just actually start thinking, it's like, what does it mean if for whatever reason the data I put in a public cloud model somewhere gets out of control and someone else gets hold of it and can actually replicate my business because there is so much knowledge in there.
Yeah, and there's also definitely a massive risk of compliance issues when you take that approach. To give you an example, Broadcom's legal team, we have NDAs with our customers and partners, and any of your NDA standard language is going to include some type of clauses around, not allowing sharing of data with third parties. Now, you can debate, is a public cloud AI model a third party or not? It's owned by a separate entity. So our legal team's interpretation of that is, yes, that is a third party. So just moving customer or private data out to these types of environments, you could be breaching uh, your existing NDAs and your existing contracts. So this has to be a huge concern. And then when you can maintain the data in your own environments, in the data repos that you control, and simply move the model to the data, and if I can do all that and I can reduce my costs at the same time, then that's a hell of a value proposition.
Yeah, and I think we will see more on the data security side potentially in the next year or two, where the first companies will have their first surprises with all of that, as people are very or some of them are even saving. Is like we work, for example, for meeting transcripts and stuff like that. We work with one vendor. We by intent did not use the built-in solution of the platform we use for meetings. And I got several people. It's like, yeah, why do you use the enterprise version of it? It's like, yeah, because that actually restricts the data. It is in a separate data pod. It is not being utilized as the overall model. And they say it's like, yeah, but the free version, they tell us we get all the same. And I said, it's like, yeah, but it's nowhere in the regulation. The sales guy told you it's going to be the same. And this is where people at the moment is all the, let's say, day-to-day job scenario, which makes your life easier, is making it easier. But you need to think about that. When I hear how many companies are, oh yeah, we have this great new email system, which is actually helping our employees to actually get rid of all the unnecessary emails. It's like, yeah, so where's the data stored? What exactly happens to all of that? Have you thought about that? Have you looked into that? No, but it makes our job. It runs in Outlook. It's like, no, it's not running in Outlook. It's not a plugin which really runs in Outlook. It runs somewhere else. It pushes your data. And sometimes it's interesting enough. It's the same people who 5 years ago said, it's like, yeah, but we can't use Exchange in the cloud because Microsoft is reading all our emails. It's like, yeah, but guess what? All the AI systems are now doing, which you're actually openly inviting on your company data whatsoever. And this is, I think, we will see quite a few interesting data security scenarios with that in the next few years. And I think we will see that more and more companies will rapidly move into private AI because they just can't handle that. And every time I speak with a legal person, that actually makes my life, my thinking even more. It's like, yeah, don't put it anywhere. It's like, this is, especially now in the EU, it's very interesting because this EU AI Act is in many areas so unclear what the consequences are if you use it somewhere else, and who is liable and whatever else. And because I think we are still very early on in these scenarios, so that's going to be interesting. And again, all of that points towards utilizing VCF, towards building the private AI platform on these. And the other point is, as you said early on, is it's all about simplicity, because most companies are not in the business of running IT in the first place. They are manufacturing Windows, or they are even building cars or something else, depending on how big they are. They don't have these massive teams to build everything in open source. I mean, they can hire them, you can do that, but I very much doubt that this really saves you money if you are not in the business of becoming part of the complete open source ecosystem from that
No,
perspective.
it can be very expensive and difficult, to your point. Most people don't have the expertise. And I can tell you, even our more experienced customers that have been running AI or ML workloads for years, the challenge they run into to actually put a model into production is substantial. After you go through security reviews, guardrail reviews, you're having to look at, does this model have some optimized kernels for the accelerator? Is there specific device drivers do I need? Is there an accelerator specific framework I have to use? There's a lot of things you have to go through. And with our platform and VCF automation, you can start with just this blueprint and you click a button and you get the entire environment already optimized for the hardware. And it's done in a matter of minutes as opposed to weeks or months. The other thing we see with the sovereign AI initiatives is, how do I maintain data residency? But then also there's fear around the control plane. Lots of the alternatives out there, they might allow you to localize your data plane, but the control plane itself is outside of your data center, outside of your offices, and all those things. We can not only ensure that your control plane is local, but we can allow you to run it completely air gapped as well. So disconnected from the internet, everything's still going to work no matter what's happening in the world. You're still going to have that flexibility.
And I think that is another point which becomes more and more important for people, is trying to figure out how you can run this, how you can run this independently. What happens if infrastructure goes down? I mean, we have an office in the Middle East in Dubai, and we were heavily affected down there in the last couple of weeks by just not having the fiber uplinks anymore because they missed one of the undersea lines. And just what you could see is the dramatic decrease in performance and the increase in latency you got by just losing one line. And especially Dubai or the UAE, they are pretty well connected. If you are in one of the other territories where you don't have that many connections, I don't want to even imagine what this really means. And we are so used by now that connectivity is always available, that most people don't think about what are we going to do from a production perspective? What are we going to do from a day-to-day business perspective if all of this drops down? Even thinking about all these companies who now say it's like, yeah, we will have an AI as a phone agent or something like that. It's like, how do you envision this to run if for whatever reason, for half a day, your internet connectivity or something like that dramatically goes down? Maybe you don't have a phone uplink anyway anymore, but also for your internal productions. If you want to utilize AI to identify failures in production and actually look at images and things like that, or if we go into healthcare, where we see more and more AI adoption now as well, where people are actually just comparing images and stuff like that, if all of that is depending on the public internet or public connectivity being available, then you might get into a serious problem. And especially in healthcare, you don't want to sit in a hospital and have the doctor not being able to utilize all the models and everything at hand, which clearly has been proven, especially in cancer care and stuff like that, highly valuable for them. If all of a sudden, instead of actually just spending 5 minutes to review the outcomes of the tools, they all of a sudden have to do all the work manually again. It's like that might work for one patient, but not for hundreds of them all of a
Right.
sudden.
Yeah, totally.
Good. So maybe let's sum a few pieces up. What would you suggest to any CIO who is on the fence whether they should really use VCF over any of the other competitive platforms out there?
Yeah,
What
I
would
mean,
you say?
yeah, I guess a couple things. It's like really do your homework first, because this, it's too often that the AI conversation gets centered around either cloud or some type of hardware purchase. And if you're not thinking about, well, how am I actually going to use this? And then what are the tools I'll need to manage it, operate it, make sure it's compliant, make sure it's available, like all of these kind of things. This is where you can start to get into some trouble. Get some good advice from your vendors. Like there's so many folks that I've talked to where a vendor comes in, they're trying to do an AI pitch, and they're like, "Well, what should I do? What should be my first use case?" And then the vendor's saying, "Well, what do you want it to do?" And that's a problem, right? It can't be AI for the sake of AI. Like people did technology for the sake of technology with their blockchain projects, right? That didn't work out so well. And like even inside Broadcom, if we're going to do an AI project, you have to have the general manager of the Broadcom division attest to the ROI statement, and we're applying that to the annual operating plan of that particular Broadcom business. So we're making sure we're being very intentional with how we do deployments. And then the second thing is you really got to think about choice. Like when you look at on premises, I can tell you where we're seeing the additional optionality start to emerge is even the hyperscalers are building their own AI appliances, right? That can now run on premises. But the question you got to ask yourself is, do I want to operate a separate appliance for every different line of business that has different choices? And then the model space is moving so fast. Do you really want to bind yourself to hardware that's only going to allow you to run a certain set of models? Right. So you need to be intentional, and you should be architecting for the expectation of change, because AI is moving fast, and be ready. And this is what VCF gives you. Change your accelerators, no problem. We got you. A better model comes out tomorrow. Well, guess what? You can onboard that via software immediately. These are things that you get to do with us, and just having that full infrastructure as a service for AI just kind of baked in, where I can virtualize, I can pull my capacity. That's going to lead to lower power. It's the other thing that we see quite a bit is when people are sizing their data centers and they're looking at these appliance pod type of architectures. Well, guess what? They are typically overspending on infrastructure. They're overspending on how they're reworking power into their data centers. And then among these pods, they might be utilizing somewhere between 30 and 50% of the capacity. So you spent all of this money that you didn't have to, right? You can start small with something like VCF. You can virtualize and pool your capacity and lower your power costs, lower your overall costs, and then make sure that you have that baked in choice as well. So these are things where we add a lot of value. We can contribute to the conversation also around helping people get started with like their first use case, such as their internal contact center using some of their own private internal KB articles or private data, and get you going pretty quickly. So that's the key. Measure the business value, build for the future, plan for the unexpected, and don't like force yourself into these very rigid architectures. That's going to get you stuck either with these rigid appliance models or rigid cloud services that again limit your choice going forward.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. No one knows what's going to be in AI in a year's or 2 years time, and the power pieces are very important. Many people underestimate that. Many other people underestimate not only the power, but I have seen people calculate completely for power, but forgetting about the cooling. And
Yeah.
then all of the sudden it's like, oh yeah, we why is half the rack not turned on? It's like, yeah, we can't because we have enough power to turn it on, but we don't have enough power to cool it down again. And so there is a lot going on. Another thing is, what would you say is the most underrated or overseen feature in the complete VCF stack? What people overlook, which they just have and maybe either don't use or actually where they don't see the value out of it and which we need to bring bigger attention to?
Wow. Yeah, there's probably a couple of things. I think people underestimate, we've already covered it, they underestimate the value of DRS when it comes to AI services because they're not thinking about load balancing across the entire portfolio. That matters. The value of being able to do whatever you want on the maintenance side without ever having to even tell the AI consumer. Like we can do live migrations or vMotions between hosts in any kind of AI cluster. That's huge value there as well. Um, so I think those are probably two good places to me that matters. Understanding the newer features like live patching that we have, that's huge from just a security and maintenance perspective. These things all start to, I think, add up pretty quickly in terms of the value that you get. And really, if you want to do artificial intelligence at any kind of scale, if you don't have your IaaS house in order, you're going to struggle. You just will. So these alternatives that are saying, "Hey, buy my AI factory," and then when it actually comes to management and operations, you got to figure out the rest. That doesn't go too well. And oftentimes, what we have our customers come back to us on is like they're like, "Man, I bought this thing. I can't operate it. I can't even do basic scheduled maintenance or patching. Everything is really hard. Can we put VCF on it?" And then the conversation shifts to, well, let's look at the hardware compatibility list. Let's see if there's a match or not. And sometimes there is, sometimes there's not, right? And then you're stuck with something that you overspent on, you're underutilizing, and you've kind of blown a part of your AI budget in a way that you probably shouldn't have. So, do your homework first. Don't have buyer's remorse. Like make some intentional decisions. And we're trying to be very clear with our customers and partners in terms of what we do, what we don't do, and where some of the gaps are that they should be mindful of as they plan this going forward. Because it's a fast moving space. You don't want to make the wrong bet, but you can't not make a bet at all. So bet on a solution that's intentionally future proofed and is going to give you this flexibility.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining. Potentially, we do another episode because private AI is pretty much moving at high pace in a couple of months or so time. I think this is going to be highly valuable for anyone listening in to really get a bit more of the business understanding and being able to articulate why VCF is actually going to be there and going to be really the best and only solution for most enterprises out there. Thank you.
No, thanks for the time. Happy to come back. I feel like we just scratched the surface here, and we definitely have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, we will.